Okay, so let's get started with 1846 with the auction replacement here. This guy over here, he's got the deck. He pulled out 7 cards. And some of them are garbage. You're, I think, guaranteed to get, yeah, because you get 2 extra cards. You're guaranteed to get some good cards. Not just garbage, but you're not guaranteed to get a lot of good cards or useful cards. So he has the CWI. You don't have any power with these, so this may not be terribly interesting because the income relation is kind of low. I like early money, and Chicago's not early money, so I'm going to hold off on that. This obviously has a better income ratio, as does this. This is the best. This gives me what? An extra 0. Okay, this gives me a tile upgrade, but the tunnel blasting company is really nice if I can make my way into the tunnels. So this is kind of a hard call as to which one I think is better, and I will roll a die on this. So I'm going to take the Lakeshore line. Now this is placed face down. Nobody knows I took it. And now I shuffle these together, put them on the bottom of the deck, and hand the deck to the next player in line, because we're going in reverse order here. All kind of goodies for the second player. And this is one of the things I kind of don't like about this is you can be... You still have to know which thing is good, so it still takes some knowledge to play the game well. But the balance among these has to be perfect, or else, people are being given options that are just not as good. Now, yes, you're given a handful, but the luck factor comes into there. And this is what kind of disturbs me, is you're paying face value for these. So the balance has to be pretty good between, what they're worth and at least and the, advantages that they accrue, in a way that it doesn't have to be in your traditional XX game where the players are being given a chance to kind of balance things out. Here I have some interesting options. Now, I really like minor companies, but I wish I could get both of these. And this is the disadvantage, of course, because this will probably go to someone else. It's good enough that someone else is probably going to pick it up. I would really like to get them both, because this sucker would then get to go, to a higher value place like Holland there. This, I think these double ports, you get to use the more valuable port version on them. Yeah, $20 per port symbol. So, this would become a 50 city early on, and I could be laying track, running across here. Of course, I only have a 2 train available, but that can merge into one of my corporations for a good amount. All the same, I think I'm going to go with the minor, because I just like those suckers. And again, shuffle, move on. I'll come back probably with... I wasn't even planning on coming back with this one, but I'll probably come back when the final deal is out and people have to pay for all their companies. Okay, well, I can't find any clarification on the meatpacking company. What I'm not going to do is I'm not going to read through the detailed example of play in the hope that there's some clarification there. I'm going to go with the card as written, which says it adds 30 to all routes to this location. I assume that's all companies. And then over here, I'll follow the rules with that. I don't know why you need a token for it to continue in that case. I can't think of a reason for that token, but I'll go with the wording as opposed to something else. that makes it a less valuable card, because if it's 30 bucks for you, then it's pretty interesting. But it can only show up in a couple of places. St. Louis is a pretty nice location, so starting the IC and trying to run a meat packing doesn't sound too bad. Nobody else will be getting down there for a while. Certainly looks better than the CWI option. Tunnel blasting is the question, though. And again, I feel like I have to roll a die here. Although this has a better income, I think the meatpacking has a clearer route towards a valuable cash flow. So here's the initial deployment. But the tunnel blasting and the CNWI, that's really centered on a move from the Southwest up to Chicago in the late game when I can take advantage of this. Pretty standard stuff here. The Big Four, I took this instead of the Steamboat Company, actually. I'm not as impressed with the Big Four as I am with the Michigan, but I still think a minor makes better money than anything else. Now the mail contract, he just picked that up. I have some real misgivings about the mail contract. I almost feel like that if anything is out there that you might want to pass on, because it produces no early money. You have to sell it to a corporation. Now then you get your 80 bucks back, and that's kind of cool, maybe. And it adds per location visited. Late in the game, that can be very valuable, but early in the game, it's not that much extra money. Meat packing, like I said, not that great, but with the Ohio and Indiana here, maybe I can get a second company, but my plans are really centered on the IC right now. This is basically just income. It is possible to start two companies in this game. Because remember, you only need 20% to float. That can get you in some danger. We'll see whether or not we see that. Somebody may go bankrupt. Here, the big Michigan Southern, of course. He took the Michigan Central, gives him a couple of track lays, might get him into someplace useful. Doesn't look terribly good. Again, mainly these are good income for some reason, even though they made no income, basically. And Lakeshore Line, Steamboat Company seemed to have some sort of synergy with that, in the sense that if I'm going to be up here, the Steamboat Company is actually of interest to me. Steamboat Company does get assigned most definitely for value. That's clearly stated in the card. The Meatpacking Company, I'm not sure why it matters that the token's there on a particular company from the way the card is worded. All right, now we go to the priority, which, is fixed. The only problem with the priority guy is he had the worst choice, theoretically, out of the card draws. But that's not necessarily the case. You could get a really horrible handful of cards that just don't go, in that initial pick. So there is a fair amount of luck in the starting of this. It's better than the opening pack at the 35, which just kind of, wow, you're screwed or not. But I feel it's so much less flexible than what's available in the games with auctions. And now I got to start thinking, hey, where do I want to go? I mean, my obvious thoughts are probably B&O and maybe C&O. B&O is pretty rich. So, well, let's pull those companies out and think about what they're capable of doing. Okay, so I'm seeing something I kind of don't like here that I didn't expect. In the rules for tokens, the Baltimore and Ohio and Pennsylvania each have tokens in Cincinnati or Fort Wayne. Okay. The tokens have two prices listed. Use the lower price, $40, if the company does connect to the spot. Use the higher price, $100 or $60, if it does not. Well, here they have $100, but they don't have the $40. Oh, it is specified there. Okay. All right. I didn't see that. And it's just like, wow. I shouldn't have to remember this in the rules terribly. I'm not good at that. And this one, yes, also 40, 60. Okay. So there's 3 corporations with special rules, and that's the B&O, the Penn, which has the Fort Wayne shit, which honestly looks better to me than the B&O. See, the advantage to the B&O is it gets kind of a short, like this is early game better money than what's up there, and I can probably get to Chicago eventually with the CNNW. So I think I'll go with that. With my tunnel blasting company, I can get through these at the cost of laying all mountain tiles and tunnel pass hex sides is reduced by 20. That makes this kind of expensive, but I can blast out this way. This tile becomes, this hex side join becomes free, as does this one. I don't know, why is that purple? Bridge, no, that's a bridge. That's not going to help. I can't blow up a bridge. Well, so I'll have to pay 20 for the bridging, but I won't have to pay this. This will just be the 20 that a normal hex is. And the B&O does not sound bad to me. The advantage of Cincinnati is it gets me down to some richer stuff, I guess, in terms of Louisville and or St. Louis, and especially if the meat packing ends up in St. Louis, which looks likely, but we don't know. So now the question is, how much money? Do I throw a lot of money into my company? Well, I've got $280, which means I could start it at 137. Or do I start a couple of companies really cheap? I think I start my company at a fair price. So I think we'll do that. So that'll be 274. The problem with that is I don't gain stock value. And actually I'm not setting the overall value of the company. So maybe I'm better off. And this is where this game is so different from some of the others, because some of the others, you know, whatever you set it as par value in other 18xx games, that's what you're going to get in your company. This, if I can make good runs early, I can get that stock value up. How much can I capitalize? Well, early on, I can run a couple of deuces here and here. Well, no. I can run a deuce here. Wow, the B&O sucks. Because it doesn't have track until the green tiles come up. Well, we're not going to pick that. Looks to me like we picked the Penn. Let's get this off the board. It's confusing me. It doesn't belong there. Yeah, I think I'm going to want the Penn, which is not as attractive in terms of this, but gets me that breakout, and I actually can play down here in so much as I want to. Is the C&O of any interest? See, this sucker I can run 2 trains off of right away at $80. This, I can as well. I can bust my way into Cincinnati, which I believe is worth more. So that's 60, and 40 is $100. Yeah, I think I'll buy the C&O instead. I don't get my dot in Cincinnati, but who knows what happens. Okay, but then, again, how much? How much is the big question. And I could eventually get the east to west run to there. Not that far future. Okay, so how much money is this worth is the question. And if I'm making 40 and 60 is 100, I don't want to start it way up here because I'm not going to gain stock value for that. Which kind of to me means either I want to buy 4 shares, which at 280 of something, right? Like two companies. I could start this at 70 and buy a couple shares of that, and then maybe get another company. Or, if that sounds too risky, I could buy 4 shares of this, and it would gain stock value over that. Yeah, I think I'm gonna float this at 70. I've played this a couple of times, but I don't really have a good feel for the game. Start considering the future of how the board's gonna look. I start worrying about Chicago, and I'm very unhappy with this track tile. It covers up all the exits coming out of Chicago. It looks like, and this is the way it has to be built because the CNWI is there, it looks like there's no exits anymore. I don't know if this was in the original tile, but what they should have is not cut off like that, but exits coming out of it. They're not printed on here either. It's not like they were, things that got cut off in that misprinting. And this goes for every one of the Chicago tiles. I'm assuming there's exits coming out of each of these, but that's really an unpleasant design factor to at least this version of it. I don't know why that was made, but it just does not make me happy. But I'm assuming that they go through, which means that there's a run, and the Grand Trunk is looking interesting here, going east to west, which will be available when the 3 trains are out. And that's particularly interesting to him with his Michigan Centrals. There aren't a lot of companies in this game. So there's only 7 companies, 5 players, a little worse proportion than we're used to in most of them. Well, what do we have that I haven't gone into detail? The IC started at a big 150 because it gets an extra $150 for that. I'm not counting on making stock value increases with the IC for quite a while because of that high stock price. But what it means is I've got a lot more cash on hand to play with there than I would otherwise. If I started at a lower value, I would get less. You get equal to the starting treasury as a starting initial stock price as a bonus from the government. And that seemed like a good idea. The Grand Trunk indeed is starting. The NYC, I haven't played my dots all out there, started low enough at $80 that, like the C&O player, I could start another company. The only problem with that is someone else could conceivably steal a second company if that happens. But one of the reasons I'm looking at this is I don't really have a huge proportion of income coming in compared to these guys with the miners. So I may want to kind of push the trains. Of course, the danger is I don't have a lot of capital in my companies, so pushing the trains might be a little hard. I have $150 here now. Of course, I can release 2 more shares and get, $160. I can get another $160 into my treasury if nobody else floats it. There is a warning in the game that the people who go bankrupt are people who do that, though. Start at a middling value as their initial float and then start a second company right away. So, maybe I don't want to do that, but it seems like the way to get the most money and the most control in the game. And those are 2 things that I consider exceedingly important. The problem is, one of those 2 companies is the Baltimore and Ohio. And we can see the B&O is not in the best of positions. I would love to get the Erie, because then my 2 companies could work together really well. Indeed, I get that opportunity. The C&O decided not to go with the Erie. It just doesn't look like it's going to make the money the C&O is, so I invested the extra money into those C&O shares. The NYC, though, wants that control, so he says, well, $80 doesn't sound too bad. I think I can get away with that. We'll see. Priority ends up over here, and we had one person investing. This guy bought a share of Pennsylvania. Not a big bonus in this game to have investors. That's one of the reasons he's willing to do it. He thinks that Pennsylvania is going to make a little bit more money than his own Grand Trunk. at the early stage in the game, and it gives him the opportunity to sell shares without impacting his own price, or anybody's really, and maybe start a new company or something, or else invest more into his Grand Trunk as it's ready to make its east-west run, where it's going to make good money. Some interesting questions. This guy, where is he going to get his capital? Where is he going to get cash from? Is the IC going to be making that much money? I doubt it, but he put a lot of capital into it, and he may not be able to hold it because of that. That's one thing in mind. This guy also holding two companies. That can be very difficult. So, maybe somebody steals one of his companies instead of starting the B&O, and then he feels like an idiot for not fully investing in one of the two companies. We'll see. But that's going to move us to the operating round, and we're going to pay out all the privates, and then start with the first company. Miners, the interesting thing is that their track laying expenditures basically eat up their money. So this guy here had to spend 20 and 40, 60 bucks, and that's what you have on board these suckers. And likewise, this guy only had 40 bucks, but he's playing in the plains, so he was able to build over there. But they start off with a train, so they get to make a run right away. So in this case, we were able to run 30 and 30, and here 20 and 20. Eventually I get down to Cincinnati. But it'll take me a while. I only got 20 bucks on here now. And some other 18xx games, you can buy private companies right away here. And I want the meatpacking company, so I transferred the money over there. I could have actually held it one more round, because I'm not going to make money off of it this round, but whatever. I should actually do that. Let's get this back. I could also transfer trains right from the beginning here. I'm only buying two trains because there's so many companies out. There's an extra company out than I necessarily expected. Otherwise, I probably would buy 3, because next round I could run a third train up here. But I don't know if I want 3 deuces. There's only 7 of them in the game, and I think they're going to go away pretty quickly the way things just look. So I'm buying a pair of them. I could have just run straight up to St. Louis with a single 2 train. This is going to require that I buy a dot here. I don't have to do it yet, so again, I held off. But I want to try to make the IC make as good a money as it can for that huge investment it has. Stock value went down because I didn't pay out revenue. It always goes down on that first round. Did I want to release more shares? No, not really. I got plenty of operating capital. I can buy a couple of these if I need to, which I may. And that puts us... Oh! I cheated. Alright. I'm so used to the normal. Actually, the Grand Trunk has to go first. I'll probably leave the same decisions in play here, but we'll see. The Grand Trunk actually went first, and we have to see what's going on with the IC. I should undo what it did, which is not a whole hell of a lot, but... Okay, the Grand Trunk bought the Michigan Central, laying 2 tracks here, 1 here. If I laid both of these, I'd have to lay them together. That works well for the Grand Trunk, but not so well for the Michigan Southern. So by laying the track for the Michigan Southern, buying this dot for 80 bucks, Detroit's an important place. Holland is a high value city to begin with. It goes down later, but later is later. I want to make good money right now. It only left me enough cash on hand to buy a single 2 train. I've got, the capability to run lots of trains. But actually, I do not necessarily want this dot. Give me that money back. 80, 90, 100. I can lay it next turn if I want to, but there's a good reason for me not to want to. I may just buy the Michigan Southern from myself, get that dot. The Michigan Southern will get 1 run then. Or I may play it out a while and get some good cash, 40 and 40 for the Michigan Southern, and run the Grand Trunk kind of weaker with this. I had to release a couple of shares to get, stock value was here, 120 bucks. It went down because I didn't make a run. It I should be able to make the 60 next turn, so my stock value is going to be increasing, and therefore if people do want to buy into it when it starts looking more attractive, and like me, not that I'm looking more attractive, I'm looking less attractive, but yeah, that's gonna be of interest. Let me undo the IC completely, because we don't know whether or not they want those trains, that track, whatever. Screwed up again. This one, not as big a deal. I don't think I have to unwind it. But the C&O should have gone first. You always go top to bottom, not a direct reversal like I had said. This is important. I had to look it up because I said, wow, that's kind of interesting because now the GT is first in there. No, I'll do the C&O. I don't think the GT's actions really affected at all. Because of the ordering, the Penn is able to beat out the NYC Erie combination, which I thought was going first, but so they only went with one train each, which is kind of fine because that leaves one deuce. The IC's got to buy that. It probably is going to buy a 3 train as well, upgrade the level, and that'll mean that I can kind of break into there or whatever. We'll see. It is possible for the Penn to make it a little more expensive for them to break in. I don't think the Erie really needs to put this dot down yet. They can think about that. They've got a cheap dot there, but it's kind of a painful location to put a dot in just to get Buffalo instead of Birmingham or Binghamton. Yeah. And I don't see anybody really wanting that space who's currently operating on this side of the board. We push towards operating round 2. The IC just hooks this track up. They do buy themselves 2 trains though. This was a hard decision between the 4 and the 3-5 because the 3-5 is kind of a, well, I could go 1, boing, 2, you know. There's certainly at least one space I kind of don't want to hit, but I'm thinking about getting a dot here. Now, of course, that makes my 2 train kind of more problematic. I had to buy it, and it'll be giving me some extra revenue, but that'll probably just be running for a 30 run unless I can whip it in directly. Basically, what I'm thinking is I need to break into there right away, though, and that's kind of the problem. Get my dot there and not worry so much about expansion in other directions. Chicago, it'll take its time, but this is a fast game, and that's something that I have to try to keep in mind. It moves much more quickly than some of them. Only share release was by the Grand Trunk. Everybody else had enough capital, at least for the first operating round. The privates and minors, we had some upgrades here. The Michigan one, maybe not that important, but who knows how fast Chicago is going to get interesting. Even here, it's a 40-buck city, so you know the track lays out to here, kind of a waste. What I couldn't do is I couldn't build up Detroit, which would have been my biggest money. I didn't have enough cash for that on board that one. And then here, upgraded that. And again, didn't have enough cash to lay more track. Although, I only got 25 bucks. I got 1 track lay again. One thing about the green track, I had forgotten about this game. It's got some of the ones that build the normal brown track, but are sort of transitional pieces that aren't normally available in an XX game. There's not a lot of track in general in this game. Plenty of yellow, but not a lot of the greens, etc. There's also not a lot of board, so that probably works out pretty well. One of the ones I played recently was a pretty small board too. It looks like these are big stacks, but those are very, very thick tiles. On par with the ones the new Mayfair game had. I'm not sure how I feel about, having to upgrade, having to have such nice components, but it's certainly not a negative. If I'm willing to spring the money, for a Deep Thought game, I'm certainly happy to, get this at a lesser cost with some pretty hefty components. One thing I'm noticing is these chips work just fine for me. They're easier to manipulate, especially given that I have a little box to use as the bank, so I don't have to reach all the way across the board. I can move the bank out of the way when I don't need it. So, which is almost never, but whatever. It's also gotten cold enough I actually threw the heat on in here. It's below 50, so I figure, yeah, I can justify not being cold, although I still have my gloves on. All right, on to the major companies, and now we go in the normal order, going from highest to lowest price. So the IC will be going first at this point. Wrong about the IC not being able to go forward. 180 run for its first run. That gave me a little bit of change, but the biggie is 144 bucks in here, which pays off, buying the meatpacking company and putting that into place, etc. If I buy this other token here, then I have the opportunity to maybe hit the meatpacking twice. Another question is, hey, I bought one token up here. At the big 4 token, this is a hard choice. I don't have a lot of tokens here. I'm going to get one here, or I'm hoping not to have to get one here, but this becomes important in running my meatpacking either up to Chicago or down to Louisville, and the Chicago run is going to be worth something. Or if I'm doing an east run, I'm going to need to get a dot somewhere as well. Maybe the Z here. Cincinnati. Cincinnati's a Z because of its tremendous port value. Another option would have been to give it the double port, but they wanted to make sure, if they do that, then it's in competition with other things for ports. So they gave it a Z value just to indicate that no matter what, Cincinnati was going to be a really important city for the traffic. So now the question becomes, well, do I want another one of these non-permanent trains? I could actually afford it, and I could run. See, I'm only going to hit the meatpacking once unless I cut down here. The game may not last all that long, especially if I'm buying a second one of these trains. On the other hand, well, what's my money good for, right? I got a pile of money in there and a lot more to come at those 150 starting values. And at 180, I'm only going to be able to pay out twice more and still go up in stock value at all. Which way do we go? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 150. I do not have enough cash for it, so I guess that makes my decision. I can't buy the cheaper of the two trains. Penn released its maximum 3 shares that it could have at a slight discount in cost, 60 bucks each. That gave it enough money so it could afford to upgrade track, buy a train, and even spring, I think, 60 bucks or so on the mail contract. That's a loss on the mail contract, but it meant that I got some stock value on the pens, etc. Otherwise, I'd have been paying 60 bucks instead of 80, which meant that I wouldn't go forward. So it seemed to behoove my, it seemed wisest to actually pay out a little bit more, even if it meant taking about a 20 buck loss on that mail contract. That's why I say the mail contract, I'm not so sure how valuable it is, because it doesn't produce an income or anything for you. It produces something good for the company, though, and I wanted to get that in there because of the stock value. The extra 20 bucks in my pocket makes up for the loss, and then the extra money coming in here will more than make up for it, in my opinion. Annoying amount of prefiguring in this game. I'll allow people to go back. Oh, wait, I would make more money if I do this. Let's just fix that during the midst of their turn. So in this case, I'm looking in particular at the end, and I did that with, who was it? The Pen. The Pen buying the mail contract was something I decided after I made my run, and I said, well, I have more cash on hand, so I can pay 60 for the mail contract, so that's pretty cool, or close to it. But here I'm looking in advance, and in particular the Steamboat Company. Now this is going to be kind of annoying because where the ports are is not obvious. And luckily there's, like in some of the old Mayfair games, a map on the back so you can see where they are, kind of. But it's not, games like 18OE had a nice solution where they put little markers on all the places that had ports or whatever, that had on-map information that you wanted to express as the board evolves and the track starts getting light. That doesn't happen here, but at the very least you have the cheat sheet map to look at. But here the question comes down to, which one of these can I buy and which one does me better, right? And that's really kind of hard to tell. I can use the Steamboat Company right away, and I could assign that plus 20 bucks to the New York Central if I want to. But I may need to do the Erie instead, and because things are kind of complicated here. So I've got some annoying balances. The Lakeshore line, on the other hand, I could also sell to the New York Central and upgrade this. The problem is I don't have enough cash to buy a train after my stock release. I could only release 2 shares. So I have 140 bucks in hand. I got to come up with 20 bucks. Well, I'm going to make that on my run. If I don't do anything special, I get 32 bucks in my company treasury for my run. But if I increase the value of my run, I get more money in my run. So, the balance comes down to, well, I'm 20 bucks short right now. So then I could pay 12 bucks for one of these. That's a bum deal. The steamship I don't have to pay for. I could just assign it and keep running it. This is my first run with the company, so I haven't lost an opportunity. It seems like I've played a lot more than that, given how busy the track lays are. This is a congested board, and there's a lot of track on it all at once because you get 2 track lays, essentially. Only 1 upgrade, but you get more track lays in this than in 1870, which covers 1870 allows you to take 2 yellows or an upgrade. Here you get an upgrade and a yellow, which really accelerates the play. This is a very, very fast game in a lot of ways. So very frustrating to play when it starts taking like 5 hours in an opposed environment, which happened to me the last time I played it. So I've played my my tile lays and paid for them, but now the question is, well, what could I get? So off an upgrade here, I hope this isn't a Z. No, that's a normal city. So that could go up to $30. So I can make an 8 buck run, which would allow me to. Right now I'm making a 7 buck run, which will still allow me to advance. So I'm not going to get any big bonus by, doing one of these, by exercising a purchase of one of these particularly. However, the free upgrade is kind of nice. But an extra buck a share is going to get me to like 20 bucks in hand that I could pay, actually 19. I don't want to take a bath on either of these, although the Erie probably can't buy them both, so I'm not going to get all the cash on hand. So I'm going to leave it at this and run my 2 train for 7 bucks a share, which will go there. And that, after paying out, I'll go forward. And then I'll have enough cash to buy my train. Now, I can't do that unless I dot this, and I can't do that because I've got the stupid the stupid Erie to worry about, and I can't dot them out of building out here. Wow, that's gonna hurt. Okay, well, I guess what that means is my run was only $6 a share, and I got to give some cash back, and my stock value does not improve. Because there's really nothing I could do to help myself here. I'm laying track that I don't know. Erie may build this piece of track. Eventually, these Z's upgrade to 3 cities, and then, you know, if nobody else dots in there, I can put my 2 dots in there. But there is the danger that somebody else could jump in there for the east-west route. The Buffalo route is better than the Sarnia one. Hard thing about this board, so for example, this is a $40 border crossing. That may not become obvious. I'm trying to see if there are any. This one, for example, this tile could be upgraded and this tile could be laid. And that could be just hidden. And then that connection is hard to see. And likewise with this connection up here. Chances are you'll end up paying for them. You'll end up being able to see them. But I was looking at this where the Erie might be playing up here to avoid having to get this dot. And then we've got kind of this painful situation where I can't see, although I could partially see, but I can't really see the price as well when that's in there, and I might easily forget it. But there are places on the board where you would completely obscure that price, and again, you just have to kind of know the board to be able to play it correctly in those cases, and it would be very easy to upgrade and create this crossing where it didn't exist before if you didn't see it. So there's a lot of room for, I think, player errors based on the way the map design is with these special little, you know, you have to pay when you build the crossing as opposed to when you lay the track. And it's not obvious the way like the Mississippi is over in 1870. Oh shit, I'm screwing up left and right here. Left and right. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to restart. Because, for example, with the pen, I paid it out as if it had 70% sitting in here. It doesn't. 30%'s over here in the bank pool where it released it. And a lot more money was available to do things like buy that mail contract or whatever in addition to getting the train, because, you know, if I'm running at 8 a share, that's an extra $24. Now, I'm going to see if I can rectify this in some way. It's going to be tough to try to handle these and unwind everything that's going on, but I'd really rather not restart. But man, there's a lot of like just balancing and stuff, and in a way that's difficult. Now, luckily I have the prices that they did pay printed out, so I might be able to do it. But like, yeah, with the Erie, you know, I'm counting on it having 8 shares, and it only had 6 in play. And I don't know how many of these companies I've screwed. The IC didn't do a release. So it's just the ones I just played. So let's see if I can rectify it. So other than transferring some cash out of the Erie and the NYC, and they didn't make a whole hell of a lot, so it wasn't that big a deal. With the pen, I had to go forward with the mail contract still, which means I lost about 10 more bucks off that mail contract. I still think it's a good deal to get that in play there. So I don't feel too badly about it, but I don't feel quite as comfortable as I did. I think I hit my tobacco or something. Staining things already. It's been kind of cool because my chips got stained and they wipe off easily. These things wipe off easily. These things are really kind of annoying. They're very, very sticky to begin with, so I accidentally gave this guy 20%. And I was looking and I'm like, well, I only add up to 90%. I knew that was a possibility. Anyway, none of the stock values changed because of any of this, but I've got to try to figure out. I was working on the C&O, and God knows where I was if I like exchanged money for these 2-track lays already. I probably did. And pretty much everybody bought one of those 3 through 4 or 5 trains, whatever the hell they are. They bought a straight 4. C&O didn't buy one at all. The reason for them is I'm running 2 trains okay, and I want to skip and not have to buy this temporary train. And then the GT bought one as well. People are buying them in part because they're cheaper. So the GT actually, if it had the extra cash, but it couldn't release any more shares, and I don't know, losing stock value means your shares don't bring as much cash into your company, and if you've got good trains and you're a cheap valued company, all your shares are going to sell out at too low a level, and you're going to end up with not enough cash. So boosting that stock value seems vital, but on the other hand, you know, I would have liked the 4 train, to tell you the truth, because I could hit 1, 2, 3, 4 there if I had that, and instead what I'm going to be hitting is looks likely to be 1, 2, 3 for now, and very shortly this dries up. See, the problem is I need cash so badly, but swallowing $80 or 40 would not move my stock value forward, but I'd have more cash on hand. Swallowing that money just doesn't seem like a terribly good idea. It seems better to me to put a little bit more money in my pocket so that I can buy more shares at a slightly higher value and get more cash into the company that way. But it's really ugly because I'm going to want this dot here, and there's a lot of competition for the dots at this point. But you've got this, money's tight. The trains are falling fast. It's just all happening so rapidly in this game that I'm actually not, I don't know. I know that it works against my preconceptions of an 18xx game in ways that make this one very, very difficult for me. Much more of a challenge in some ways than some of the others. So, if this is your learning game, it's teaching you things that aren't applicable to most XX games. Whereas, it does teach you some of the basic patterns, but it's not giving you a very good feeling for how the games are normally going to fall down. And it also, in some ways, has a real harshness to it, just with how fast everything's falling and going. Now, obviously, if you've got newer players, maybe they don't, maybe they don't throw as much money around as quickly and get things moving as fast with the trains. But wow, to me, this is kind of a brutal one to start on. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I would advise this as a best early shot. It teaches you some very strange things. Now, for the first time in the stock round after those operating rounds, and it feels fairly late in the game already. I mean, it feels mid-game to me. You have this hard call of whether or not you want to buy shares that are here in the stock market or from your bank, from your treasury. So for the most part, you want to buy them out of the stock market because you don't want to leave shares here because the share value goes down. But if you absolutely need to get cash into your company, buying it directly from your treasury is a nice way to do so. Now, in some cases, you don't have the option, like the Illinois. He bought a share directly from there. And he's looking at getting an early permanent train and just kind of crushing the competition that way. That's what he's hoping for. However, he's doing it on 3 shares. When you compare things, yeah, the C&O is making the most money with its pair of deuces, but that's not that's not going to be viable for long. And then, you look at the IC and it's making almost as much money as 2 shares of CNO, which runs about the same investment cost and looks a lot more solid. Then you look at some of the lower valued ones and they're not making that much money. They're falling in below the IC. So if you were an investor, if you weren't worried about your own companies, you'd be buying those ICs right now probably. But nobody's in that position. Everybody's in the position of scrambling to make their own companies work. And nobody can afford to do this. This guy having 2 companies early on hasn't really helped him. And just, the B&O is going to be the present for somebody, but it's not going to be a very valuable one. It's always trapped. Whatever happens, the late running companies get so little track that unless it's something like the Erie that just hooks up automatically, and the B&O is close, but we'll see, because this is going to get dotted out before they get a start. Unless you're playing something that's just pipelined into track that already exists, it's pretty damn hard to start that final company or final 2 companies. And the way the stock round closes down, and we got to be careful about these, especially the minor companies that have money on their treasury, to make sure to get them out of my corporation's hands. That probably should have happened last round, but nobody had cash. They were buying up those phase 2 trains, and they didn't have the money to convert things over. But I got to get these, into the corporations, especially these guys that have trains and money and everything. You don't want them just disappearing on you. So what happened was GT owner dumped his Pennsylvania. We're going to have some stock value changes. Nothing sold out, of course. However, the NYC, the Erie, and the Pennsylvania all drop in value because they've got shares in the stock market. This guy was unable to buy up all the pens, so he bought a CNO that he thinks will make more money. He's kind of looking at this as, if the B&O is not starting, who's going to buy this fucker? Maybe the CNO. And if that happens, that's fine. It's on par with everything else, and it'll make a little bit better money than the other $70 runs that are out there. Conceivably, I could buy shares of my own company out of my company treasury. I'm not going to be able to release, which makes that kind of a problem. But the thing is, I'm losing some stock, or not gaining as much stock value as I should be off of that company, and that's one of the problems that we're going to face here. All right, so we move into the operating round with this new setup. Shares and privates have paid out, with the Southern Michigan actually pulling in like $55 for each player, which is kind of a nice sum, given that it only cost, $140. It's about what you'd expect. Of course, the IC still racking in its 23 run, building some free track, collecting up enough money. Eventually, they may be in a position where they can buy this. That'll disable one of these. The train limit's still 4 at that point. They could buy one of these then. But they'd have to discard a train. But that's sort of the power of this high capitalization company, is I have a ton of money on here. Or alternatively, I could wait, let somebody else crash it, and then do it, do my purchase when I want later. If I don't push this out, I may have enough money for 2 permanent trains. And that would obviously be ideal. The CNO expends money. Putting a dot down here, which is kind of key for making a lot of money and connecting up to Louisville. They're running at 17, which is more than twice the value. So we actually go up 2 spaces because we paid out. If we didn't pay out, or if we paid half, we could collect more cash. And we're a little cash poor. I'm a little worried about it, given the situation I'm in. but I also have so much cash on hand that maybe I can float the B&O at a good price and help feed. I've generally had really bad luck trying to do things like that in this game. It just moves too fast, you know? I mean, it's like these miners, they don't collect up a lot of cash because it moves too fast. That's going to put us to the Grand Trunk. He managed itself quite a power play. I paid 60 bucks to the player for the Michigan Southern. That gets me the Michigan Southern's choo-choo. I can't run it this time. But even without running it, because now I have this dot, and I was able to then buy track through Chicago and got me the east-west run. With the 3-5 train, I went 1, 2, 3. The 80 buck extra is well worth it. It got me to a 23 run. I paid out half. It got me a 2-space advance, just like the C&O has. And I've got a fair amount of cash left in here. I don't want to buy one of these trains. That's just going to cause problems. But now it's looking a lot more comfortable towards getting to the permanent train. And that was a serious jump ahead by them. This is where the game really kind of all cracks at once, is that players who don't manage something like that, or something like what the IC has managed with its high stock value, are going to just get left in the dust, and you can really get obliterated in terms of positioning at this stage in the game without going bankrupt or anything. You just, you know, you go from looking like you were, you know, in with the rest of the pack. Grand Trunk didn't look like it was doing all that great, to, wow, I'm like way behind now. And was not able to do anything quite as dramatic. They had no cash on board, so they couldn't do any track uploads. They couldn't lay a dot or something. If they could have set things up so they got an east-west run going through here. But they aren't set for that. So they ran what they could with the mail run included in that big 3-5 train. They were able to get up there in price, up to 26 or 260. They paid it all out. Because they were at the 70, they couldn't quite get the double by paying half, so they got some cash in hand, enough to buy the big 4, which now puts them down there. And the bonus of these is that you get a dot that doesn't come from your pool. You get it out of, you know, the excess that's over here. So it's just a bonus dot on the board, and that's always kind of sweet. So next time they'll be able to run perhaps another train down here. That's another, well, that's not set up quite yet, but this way is. So that's another $8 that they have available to them. So they may not be in bad shape either. And with the NYC and the Erie is struggling mightily. But he manages to, doesn't buy any of the privates in, but he assigns the steamboat company over here to the NYC, manages to make enough money, 22 a share. He's already played a dot here because he released a share so he could do that, and is able to move his own stock forward a little bit. Now the problem, of course, is the Erie, which is now cut off here because there's basically no routes into Chicago anymore. And this is the real problem in this game, is there are dots that become very, very important, but there's a lot of them. It's not just this one. This dot could be pretty important too, although the fact that these two are closed off now kind of makes this northern route less attractive. So now the Penn and the Erie are thinking elsewhere. Now the Penn is lucky. They have a, well, or prescient, they have a dot down here from the big 4 that's going to allow them to break into there more easily. But the real question, though, is, hey, is there going to be a way of kind of slipping around this way, or is it too late? Is that dot going to be gone? The IC looks set up for it. Maybe the Penn will get it. Whoever. Who has the CNWI? Ooh, that dot. I bought that over without playing the dot. The CNO
is going to have that dot. He manages to keep up with the pack in terms of stock value, even if it's not doing very well as a company. Cut off from here, running a 2 train here, no, between here and the 3.5, shooting up here, hitting the best it can, still manages to get itself $16 a share, which is as good as the CNO is doing essentially. And at this point, it's kind of interesting because nobody wants this train. The CNO kind of has to buy it to prevent things from going completely badly. But things don't go as badly in this game. When the brown phase hits, phase 3, I'm going to still get to run those suckers once more. And as long as, I have all these shares, so I can release all my shares. So my goal is to get my stock value up as high as I can so that I get as much capital so I can buy that permanent train and be in good shape. Unless somebody wants to spring for it like the IC, I don't see what's going to crack the board at this point. The NYC and Erie just, nobody with a 3 train or a 4 train or whatever you want to call them, these phase 2 trains, wants to actually play, wants to get a second one. They're just too bad. So it could well go through the second operating round without cracking. And then it becomes a question of, well, does somebody start the B&O? And that's an interesting question because what I've seen in this game is usually the person who does start that company that flushes out this last train, it just doesn't get a very good return on their money for that. They'd be better off investing. So we may be at a point where the game enters a sort of a stasis and doesn't move forward until people are not making money. Now, obviously, this guy cracking it doesn't make any sense. He's got so many problems. The CNO has a reasonable reason to do so if they can come up with enough cash, because they can use that, and maybe some of the other companies like the Penn, maybe they can use some of the cash that they have, that they're flowing into that corporation, to buy additional permanent trains. These guys are pretty cheap. Especially if you're floating it at like 150, that you could maybe get a couple of them, and then later, as the rest of the shares come out in conjunction with your other company, maybe be able to get another train and have an excess train where you have 2 permanent trains on one company. This guy's expecting to have 2 permanent trains on a company, I guess. I'm not sure. He doesn't have the cash right now, but he's got this, which is a huge wad of money. And especially if people start investing in it because it looks like it's good, that's going to happen, I think. Operating around, all the miners have been, not the privates, but all the miners have been bought into the corporations, so they're no longer going to run. So I just paid out for the privates. And what happened? The IC ran first, same 23 a share. But we hooked up to Chicago, bought our dot there, exercised our option here, laying some extra track, moving in. This is getting us in a position where maybe we can break. Yeah, it's hard to figure out where we're going to be able to break in. But if there's an opening here or here, those are our best options. Going through here, although it's a rich city, is another dot that we'd have to cope with. And we have only 1 dot left. And we didn't use this one. Now, this one's not very important for this reason. The meat packing goes away when the stage 4 happens. So this location may be less important than Chicago in this location. It's hard to tell. I wanted the Chicago dot because Chicago is such an important city that if I need the run through up there, that might be most important. The problem is, so this has a big plus 50 instead of a plus 20, so there's a 30-point difference, which is the same as what there is between the prices for Chicago and St. Louis. Right now the difference is the meat packing. Once that goes away, though, my eventual east-west route, if it can happen, and it can probably happen. No, this is impossible for anyone except the CNO, unless the CNO disappears. So,
I guess there's a possibility it could come up here. Doesn't look like those dots are going to get used up by anyone. But as of right now, I'm looking to try to see if I can break in over on the richer side of the board. You know, it runs a pretty stagnant 17 still, but we're trying to break out with some of that crazy track that this game includes. The pieces they're not really the pieces that I've ever wished were there. They're the pieces, well, I have, but they're pieces that fit with some of the brown track that comes with the original 18XX games, like 1830 and the old, 29, 25, I don't remember which is which. 29 is, I think, the originals for this. And I just can't remember the names that I played them under. And let's see. The Grand Trunk, as the next company, took advantage of their last tile for the Michigan Central. And they're allowed to do this because they hooked both the Michigan Central spaces up. If they hadn't set it up so that the other space was used, it wouldn't have happened. Now, they spent basically $40 on improving a run by $1. I don't know how much that, temporarily. I don't know how much that's worthwhile, you know, but whatever. They have enough money for a permanent train and no desire to get another train. So, you know, with their 3 trains running, it seemed like a decent idea. But they have enough dots, they could have run from here to here and here to here. Instead, they're running this and that. And it just, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have done. But I felt like, oh, I get my free track lay, so I have to spend the other money to do it. The NYC and the Erie work together. The NYC able to get its east-west run now. So I have that dot there. I probably could have gotten a better run last time. I think I screwed up. Trying to get as much money into my pocket as I can. Both miners went into my pocket. That's going to allow me to buy more shares, is basically the issue, and get more cash into my companies. The NYC only half paid out, but the Erie fully paid out with a fairly puny 16 run, but the NYC, because of the east-west, was able to get a better run. The Erie wishes it could have bought a dot. It could have bought this dot if it didn't buy the lakeshore line, but that dot's not the one it wants. It wants this one because it gives it the flexibility in through here if this gets dotted out. But if this gets dotted out, if this gets dotted out, I have to kind of do the breakthrough. And this is the more valuable of the cities, and this, that, and the other. I'm probably going to be running a skip train because they're cheaper until we hit the big one, which I hope I don't have to pay for. And so that's the end of this operating round. And comes the hard decision for everybody whether or not they want to float the B&O. I bet you somebody's going to do it. I think the CNO is planning on it. These guys can't afford to. Other people who might do it are people who are doing well enough as it is. So, priorities here, though, which means the CNO gets the second shot at doing so with someone ahead of them who is not going to do it. So I think we'll see the CNO floating them. A lot of track out already. This one zooms along. All right, sending it up.